Is anybody in the audience?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Calling the meeting to order the Resource Conservation Commission meeting for January 8th. Calling to order at 6:31. Have Andrew as the timekeeper. He's not on yet. Hopefully he'll be joining us along with Chris and Kim. Since there's no public, item 2, public appearance for non-agenda items. No one's in the audience, so we can move on to item 3, approval of the minutes. Draft minutes from November 13th from the RCC meeting. Do I hear a motion to adopt those minutes?
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Open for discussion. Hey, Kim. Is there a discussion on the draft meeting minutes from November 13th? If not, let's go ahead and take a vote on all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes. Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
Aye.
those opposed? None opposed. The ayes win. Meeting's adopted. Moving on to item 4, agenda items, new business. Presentation by Todd Wollenbach on the Fitchburg refuse and recycling. I think Todd is here to provide any questions and answers we had, but I'll turn it over to you, Ben, to introduce Todd.
Yeah, so Todd was gracious enough to join our meeting tonight, and if you haven't met him, he is basically our representative from Pelletieri. So he's been super helpful with just kind of really with any kind of information that we've had questions about, whether it's what's Fitchburg doing, or even comparisons to other communities, as of course Pelletieri serves many of the surrounding communities. So yeah, Todd's been a big help and is very knowledgeable, and we're very happy to have him here tonight to kind of really just answer any questions that people may have, and provide any updates that Pelletieri may have on things that are new with their processes. And then as well as just kind of rehash some of the discussion that we have had in the past regarding cardboard and just things of that nature. And if you'd like, I could bring up the document that Todd had prepared and share that with everyone if people would like that as a refresher.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great, Ben. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Well, I will share that.
And I've got some kind of some follow-up to that, and sat down with some of my colleagues, and I know you're kind of looking at I apologize. Am I okay to speak here? I don't mean to just jump in.
Absolutely. The floor is yours.
Well, first off, Happy New Year. Good to see most of you again. It's been a little while. No, when we last talked in, I want to say it was September's meeting, if I'm not mistaken, I kind of put together just a general analysis of what Fitchburg is doing from a volume standpoint with their recycling, and specifically the 10 dumpsters that you're doing with the corrugated at your recycling center. And a follow-up on that, just a couple things I was going to talk about, then obviously we can discuss. I would answer any questions you might have. But again, to touch on it, Fitchburg is the only community of the 40 communities we're in right now. Pelletieri is in 40 different towns, villages, cities around kind of south central Wisconsin, and we're servicing about 70,000 homes right now. Just started Monona as a new city we took on this year. We're real proud of that, and Mount Horeb and Pointet, but Fitchburg is the only city that we work with that has a kind of open to the public, non-manned drop-off site. I know I had a chance to talk with David Pelletieri today, as well as Danielle Pelletieri, as well as the gentleman that has worked with you fine folks in the past. And I know when we kind of got things started over there, it was, I know Fitchburg wanted to have let's have this great space that people can come and really encourage recycling, make it accessible for everybody. And we obviously love that, your efforts from recyclability, sustainability standpoint. Obviously, Fitchburg's always been on the forefront of that, which obviously is somebody in that industry we respect a lot. But after going over the numbers in other communities, I do, and please don't take this the wrong way. Your generosity and goodwill might be sort of being taken advantage of at that center right now. That would be the politically correct way to put that, I guess. I know when we talked before, you're looking at, how do we kind of reduce some costs moving forward? When we started out, we had 8 dumpsters that were included in the city contract. Since then, we've added 2 more per your request, which are obviously an additional cost to the city. That being about $12,000 a year, and that's just for those 2 additional dumpsters that moved from 8 dumpsters to 10 dumpsters. You had asked me what my suggestions were, our company's suggestions for how can we reduce costs and what can we do at that location. And it really boils down to about 3 or 4 options. One, which I know isn't a viable option, is to remove that option altogether. A ton of communities are going away from that service. Fitchburg has.
Todd, excuse me, are you talking about removing the drop-off option altogether?
Yeah.
What is the cost for that right now?
Well, the 8 dumpsters are factored into the total cost and broken down to a per monthly basis. Right now, Fitchburg's paying for, if you broke down the trash and recycling, the recycling end of that is $6.04 a home is your recycling cost times current count of 6,202 residents. You're $37,400 a month, which correlates into about $450,000 a year is your total cost of recycling. That is everything all together. That's the curbside for people as well as your drop site. Again, that's cumulative. I just want to give you an idea of the total cost that the city is paying right now.
Todd, another question along those lines. Of all the municipalities that you service, how many don't offer some kind of drop-off, even if it's staffed?
Most.
Most don't offer any drop-off at all?
The ones that do, a lot of places have a drop-off site, but it's typically going to be for, like you guys have the polystyrene dumpster there, or a special metals drop-off. It's a little more specific. And a lot of places do have, a corrugated drop-off as well. However, what Fitchburg doesn't do that the communities that do have these sites do is everybody else basically makes it mandatory that you live in the area that has the drop-off. And one of my suggestions to move forward on this, because to be honest with you, I'd be willing to bet that 75% of the corrugated that's going into those dumpsters are not from your average, John Q. Public at their house. The way that's set up, there's no way anybody can tell me that every small business, people that live in Madison, Oregon, Verona, are not coming and dropping off all their corrugated at those drop-off sites. People know that it's there. I mean, it's a great option for the community, but you're putting the onus of all that cost associated to the city on the residents and yourselves. And again, I promise you, I bet you could send out a survey and say how many of you use our drop-off site for your cardboard, and it's going to be a pretty small number, other than the occasional, I bought a new refrigerator and I have no idea what to do with this huge box. My suggestion would be a couple things. And it's worked in some other communities. But a lot of it involves around having to staff that location. I know a great way to fund that would be to look at getting a recycling drop-off permit. To give you an example, Sun Prairie charges $100 if you want to use their site. It's an annual cost. But what that's going to do is twofold. One, they have to go online, get a pass. So when they show up, they can show that they're a resident of Fitchburg. Or if you want to leave it open, that they pay to use that site. That's going to eliminate, every Tom, Dick, and Harry from stopping by from any place nearby. Or, if I owned, Ben's widget shop and I'm going through, why would I pay for a dumpster for my business when I can take all that and drop it off for free at Fitchburg? And again, please don't take any of this as I'm not encouraging recycling. I'm just saying I'm looking at ways that we can look at reducing costs for the city. And obviously, as we move forward, no costs are going down. So as everything else goes up, that might be a good avenue to look at reducing some of your costs. And you're like, staffing it obviously costs money, but if you're charging $50, $75, even $100 to buy a permit to use your thing, I mean, you get 600 out of 6,000 residents that are using it to buy a permit. That's $60,000 a year income you have to be able to have somebody possibly staff that. And again, I'm just using rough numbers. Currently, anybody in Fitchburg can upgrade to a larger recycling cart for no charge. People can get a second recycling cart for like a $99 annual fee. So it's not like the programs aren't in place to encourage residents to recycle. And the means are there, and they can get a bigger cart. They can get a second cart. Now, I don't have to go to the dump. But it's that would be my number one suggestion. I know that is more work. It's, getting the word out, but you're going to eliminate a ton of random people that don't live in the area being able to just stop by and fill up those dumpsters. Another option that's worked in a lot of other places that have looked at reducing that, reduce the hours. Right now, basically, you can go any time of the day. I think it's daylight hours. Obviously that's a little shorter in the winter, but if you're like, the recycling center is open, Saturdays from 8 to 2 and Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for, 5-6 hours, whatever it might be. That's another great way to reduce the amount that comes in there. Granted, that would involve, and I know a lot of it from driving out there and just, looking at maps. I know a lot of that's fenced in, but right now it's just open. It wouldn't be too tough to put a gate on there that, somebody, it could be a random public works, somebody or parks department or somebody that works at that location, come out and unlock that gate for certain hours of certain days. That will dramatically cut down what goes in there. That would be a cheap, good start to that. But again, a lot of this would have to, involve a little extra staffing or something involved. But, you have to kind of sit back and look, what is our goal? Because again, originally, and, God bless everybody there for this, that it's, we want to encourage recycling. We want to encourage to have a place that people can do this. But by reducing those hours or making that permit necessary, people aren't going to just, not recycle. They'll still find a home for it, or they'll do it the right way, or do it in the community they live in, or find a way to recycle it. That is basically the only real three options I can see is manning it, reducing hours, or doing a fee base so you can know that people in your community are the ones using it.
Hey, Ben,
Don't mean to sound harsh, but that's kind of where we're at with that.
Ben, has our camera system identified anybody abusing the system there? Like, commercial people coming in, dropping off cardboard and things like that?
I mean, the camera has picked up vehicles dropping off what seems to be more cardboard than what you know, a single family home could realistically generate. So, you know, very likely some kind of a business or contractor or whatever. But you know, if it's in the bed of some kind of pickup truck, and no one's there, there's not really a good way to prove this person isn't, you know, or this person is abusing it. So I think
And I will say this, and I'm sorry for interrupting, Ben. We have very little contamination in the corrugated. So for what it's worth, what's going in there is corrugated. It's not like we haven't seen any abuse from like people just throwing random cans or anything like that in there. Everybody's doing a really good job of making sure it is corrugated in there. And I'm sorry, back to you, Ben. I apologize.
sure. And Todd, your point about the gate, we actually do have a gate there now. It's just not really being utilized. And you know, I agree that, you know, you look at Madison and all these other communities, their hours are much more limited than the city of Fitchburg. So, you know, it's not necessarily a question of needing full-time staff. It's really just, I think, you know, you could kind of staff it, drop the hours, and, you know, with the combination of those two things and maybe a permit fee, you know, I think it could be pretty self-sustaining in that aspect.
I have a question. So, Todd, if we completely, just for argument's sake, if we completely eliminated the cardboard recycling, like at all, how much money would that save us on our contract annually? I know that might just be that's a difficult thing to maybe say, but
Like I said, because a lot of it's worked into the contract, but and please don't quote me on this, but you know, it could be got upwards $40,000-$50,000. Like I said, that's broken down to a per person cost, you know, on a monthly basis, whatever that might be. But I could look at getting harder numbers for that. But
But you said those other two containers were 12,000 a year for us?
correct.
Okay, so that's,
that would be inclusive of the 10 containers though. Or I know this is just a guesstimate, but I'm just trying to get a sense of like the scale of how much this whole operation is costing us. The reason I ask is because there is always that kind of cost benefit, like implementing a system where we have to issue permits, where we have to staff it. There is a real cost to that, to staff and staff time and staff capacity. And so I guess the question that just then becomes like, yeah, it's not great that other people are using our site, but is it worth saving? Because we're probably still going to have a site. So is it worth saving $30,000 a year? How much is it going to cost our staff to implement a different system? I just wanted to throw that out there as a comparison point. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
different thing it's kind of difficult to ascertain, but at the same time, I am concerned about staff capacity in order to implement something like that and to maintain it over time. And is it worth that amount of money to make sure that our residents have, or can we implement the like a very minimal thing, like all Fitchburg residents have to get a sticker to come, and then we police it, you know, a few times a year, and you know, try to tell people to, you know, to make it clear that we're not accepting kind of a half measure, just to make it more clear. Just worth thinking about.
Todd,
And-
could you, I know that you just gave us an estimate, but could you, not tonight, but could you pin that down so that we have a better number to work with, please?
Yes, and sorry, I'm in my wife's office here. I'm usually at my other office, but yes, I will.
Would you like me to send you an email about that?
I would love that,
All right.
and I can make a note here.
I mean, what do the commissioners think about having reduced hours? as a start.
Using the gate.
Ron, I'm not sure we're gonna come up with an answer tonight, but maybe we can digest the options and discuss this at the February meeting? Would
Okay,
that be acceptable?
yeah,
Yeah.
Could
and-
could I just ask a quick question, Ron, or Ben? If we were looking at staffing the site, would we be looking at current staff having to staff it or hiring additional staff to staff it? Or do we know?
Well, it may be a combination of both of those things. I guess it would depend on what the hours would be. If the hours were dropped down low enough, then it's possible it could be staffed with existing staff members. For example, right now in the winter, the parks crews, they're not doing as much of the cleanup at the parks. So they're going to actually be dedicating some time on the weekends this winter to just stop down there and make sure that residents are the ones that are actually using this facility. So I guess it would be hard to say exactly at this point. I think it would depend on the hours piece of it.
And like I mentioned, if you were to, so I mean, it wouldn't even have to be that high of a dollar amount, but if it would, and even if you did have, near, neighboring cities, the people that live, the side of Oregon or Verona, or even some Madison residents, if you make sure people are registered or have some sort of thing they can put in their car or register and just say, hey, there's, we'll have a camera to make sure that moving forward, you need to have a sticker to use the site. That might provide you enough additional income to keep everything just the way it is if you want to, but it'll absorb the cost of it, additional dumpsters, things like that. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to think of some really, things that have worked in other communities and what other communities are doing. Like I said, I can't tell you how much I respect everything that Fitchburg does from a recycling and sustainability standpoint. But it's like I said earlier, I feel like your goodwill might be slightly being taken advantage of by just everybody that wants to bring their stuff there. You sell passes, I think you could bring in some income to offset those costs without having to do too much staffing.
hey, Ben, to follow up on what Diane mentioned, is it possible, I don't know if you or someone could put together like a memo to us to outline our options so we can look at those, particularly to get some information back from Todd on the cost?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something we can review and then, either take a vote on or discuss it at the next meeting.
Ben, I already put some stuff down in a Word document, so I'll just share that with you.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you, Diane.
All right, thanks, Diane.
Yeah.
And we, and like I said, it's going to boil down to, kind of what's important to you guys and what's the goal of the city. And we want to support that any way we can. It doesn't behoove us for you to not have those all out there. We are, as much as we partner with our cities, I mean, if you guys wanted to put 4 more dumpsters up there, great. I mean, that's behooves us. And we're still a for-profit company, it's like but no, we look at the grand scheme of things. I mean, we really pride ourselves, and that's why we've been successful in areas is we always try to eliminate excess like that. It's, we want to do what's best for everybody. But those are so full that they're oftentimes being almost like pushed down to get more stuff in there, even though there's 10 out there. Not every day of the week, but we're out there 5 days a week emptying 10 dumpsters.
I think part of that problem is, at least when I've been there, people aren't collapsing their cardboard. I think that's part of it, the problem. But Todd, along those lines, let's say that we reduce the cardboard drop-off at the drop-off site. You mentioned that we're paying quite a bit of money. Fitchburg is paying quite a bit of money to have unlimited curbside recycling. So if let's put both of those together. Let's say that we encourage people to either increase their recycling cart or get a second one. How much money would we save by eliminating and you may have to dig this out, the overflow, the unlimited curbside recycling?
Gotcha. And Fitchburg is the only community that I'm aware of right now that we do have where residents can put out extra recycling. We've gone away from that in so many communities just because they just came out with it again. It's the 6th or 7th most dangerous job in the country is the garbage man right now. So, we prefer to have our guys in the trucks and not out of them. But we know how important the recycling is, and that's a program we put in place when we extended our contract years back with you folks. And we are willing to take that extra, bagged recycling on the curb right now. But we have in place, like I said, let me see if I got the numbers here. Right now, just to give you an idea, there's about 1,700 people out of, 6,200 homes that have the 95-gallon recycling bin. For the other 4,700 people, that costs them, per the city and per Pelletier everyday's agreement, there's no charge to get a larger recycling can. There's only a charge if you want to get a bigger trash can right now. And if people are using that much recycling, and like I said, God bless them if they are, you can buy an extra can. I have to check exactly what contractually is, but I think it's $99 a year to have a second 95-gallon recycling bin, which is a lot of recycling. So like I said, when I see how much is getting dropped off at this site, I would be flabbergasted if that was, your normal residence. And I look at it like that. And obviously we live in a society, you want to do what's best for everybody. Unfortunately, the world we live in, everybody's, what's in it for me, unfortunately, where I am a true advocate, like what's the best for everybody collectively. But and again, I don't have hard numbers. Obviously, there's no way for me to tell that, but I do honestly feel like I just can't fathom a scenario where your average homeowner is going out there and filling up those dumpsters.
But Todd, I was thinking though, in our last contract, I think the proposal had a couple of options, and one was eliminating the overflow unlimited curbside recycling. Mm-hmm. What was the difference between not having it and you don't have to tell, if you could just get back to it.
Oh, I will. Like I said, I've got all that handy. I apologize. I'm working at home, not in the office tonight, so I don't have that information in front of me, but very easy for me to dig up. That'll be no problem at all getting you that information this week.
And Todd, I had another question. I know at one point we were looking at instead of every other week for recycling, what would be the cost if we were to look at every week? Because I know there are some municipalities that have moved to that. I don't know, is there any way to also kind of take a look at if there's any cost savings if we did that versus the unlimited curbside? Or does that help us reduce what's going over to the site? If I know that's hard to quantify.
I do understand what you're saying, though. If we went to weekly recycling, because I know at the time that was all broken down on the RFP response and our proposal to you. Mm-hmm. I am more than happy to dig that up, because there was a weekly recycling, every other week recycling, and every other week with unlimited recycling extra bag pickup. We found the weekly recycling has been a very successful program in the communities that have implemented that. It encourages more recycling, less contamination. Because in Fitchburg right now, your standard size trash can is the small 35 gallon. And then people pay if they want to be a 65 or a 95, it's like a $48 or something like that to get a bigger trash can. And again, I'm close, but don't quote me on that right now. But when people don't have enough room for their trash, sometimes those little extra things get slipped into the recycling, and that can contaminate the recycling. It's not a huge problem, but it happens. We see it a lot where there's trash in the recycling. Where every other week recycling does help, or every week recycling does do that. But it's, like I said, there's so many different factors that go in, but I'm more than happy to get back to you with what the weekly recycling option was at the time, what it would save to reduce the extra curbside bags, which isn't a huge amount. A lot of people will take advantage of it, but it's not an overwhelming majority of people using the extra curbside, the extra bagged recyclables. But yeah, no, if you want to give me a list on what you want to know, I can get you all that information really easy. And again, my sincere apologies for not having that at the ready here tonight, but
We have 3 minutes left on this item. Just wanted to flag that.
Yep. Thanks,
All
Terry.
and yeah, no, I apologize for rambling. I just had a bunch of notes I was going over and wanted to kind of give you our, not only my personally, but just kind of Pelletari's suggested options on that recycling site. But we'll support Fitchburg in any way they want to, and we'll do what makes sense for the city.
Right. Well, we thank you for your time, Todd, and the options that you provided to us. Any other follow-up questions for Todd?
Thanks,
Okay.
Todd.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank
Todd,
you.
for
Thanks, Todd.
not-
Thank
Hey,
you.
thank you so much for having me. And I know I've mentioned this before, but I hope you all know you can reach out to me anytime with any questions or concerns. I'm pretty darn easy to get a hold of.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Todd, thank you not only for being available tonight, but also for all the data that you collected and provided to us. It was a real eye opener.
Yeah.
No, anytime. That's what I'm here for. You guys are an important community to us, so we will. I'll be available to you anytime you need.
Thanks a
Great.
bunch, Todd.
Thanks.
All right. Enjoy what's left and be safe tomorrow.
You too.
You too.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's move on to the next agenda item 4B, police facility sustainability goals. Presentation by HGM Architects. Ben, you want to go ahead and make your introduction?
Yes, I sure can. So we've got FGM Architects here. Brian Mead is representing them. And then we've got Paul Woodard, who is acting as the project manager for the city. And hopefully everyone got a chance to take a look at the sustainable design memo that was sent out last week. I think this is going to be kind of the basis of the discussion and the presentation. And it looks like maybe we've got a couple other folks from FGM Architects on the call here. So I will turn it over to that team, and feel free to do some introductions, and we'll get rolling on this item.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. On behalf of our team, it's great to be back in front of you all again. I think it was October 9th, the last time we got to present to you all. So great to be back here. I do have a few other team members with me for backup support as well. So Andrew Mayo, team member at FGM, and also Jason LaRoche with Ring du Chateau Engineers as well. So both have been very helpful, and Jason and his team especially on a lot of the energy and mechanical data, some of which we'll go into today. So you're absolutely, Ben, right. The summary, the main key, and I'm going to share a few screens here that we can go back on. But the way that our team, Jason, Andrew, and I thought would be most effective, and let me just start sharing here, is if we could, knowing we have 45 minutes, so obviously we want to stay on schedule here, is to focus on, just make sure the slide's big enough, is primary objective. As you recall, we definitely had the introduction to some of the sustainable enhancements that you all were going to consider back in October. And there's been lots of great feedback in the last so many months since. So tonight's main goal is we're going to give maybe a short 10-minute or so overview just to make sure, if there are any questions or clarifications. But then we really would like to open it up and spend most of the time hearing from you all on how you think the best way to spend the $2.5 million enhancement allowance for this project. For example, in October, just quickly going back through the milestones, we kicked off over 6 months ago, right at the end of May, with a sustainable design workshop. And we started to get glimpses into some of the benchmarking and target kind of data that you all would like to focus on. And a lot of it obviously was focused around energy reduction goals, whether that's through the mechanical systems, whether it's through renewable energies, very, very tight thermal envelopes, all those categories that were focused around energy seem to be a top candidate. And then there's always been a lot of interest in meetings we've had with the various groups at Fitchburg around electric vehicles, the future of them, and charging stations as well. So as we progress from programming to schematic design, we met with you all on October 9th. And again, those focuses on energy and even some of the discussion we had on charging stations did rise to the top. So now we are in the design development phase for a couple more months. And, it's very critical the further we go down that we obviously can't keep holding a lot of different options for different mechanical systems and, different things here and there. So it is getting to be very much that time to say, okay, of that enhancement allowance budget, what are those critical things that you really want to guide us on? And we're not going to get a lot into the weeds in the nuances, but as you saw in the memo, there are a lot of different categories and line items. And I even tonight there were a couple suggested bundles at the end of that memo, but I have a live Excel file tonight that I will have open so that any of those reconfigurations or combinations that you want to look at, I can simply just copy those different options and ideas into that one column, and we can almost create a live new bundle or combination, if you will. So,
Just a question before we get started.
yes.
So when you talk about the 2.5 million, is that the actual city's contribution, and then any sort of grant funding or incentives we get from the government would expand the budget beyond that? Or would the grants reduce the city's contribution to that 2.5 million?
So I don't want to speak incorrectly here, so I don't know, Paul.
Yeah, the grants are on top of 2.5 million. So if we get X number of dollars in the grants, it's 2.5 plus X.
Okay, so it'd be like we'd potentially add on to it.
Yeah, exactly. You'll see it later on when we look at the geothermal, for example. The federal tax credits is what's bringing that option more feasible to do.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Paul, for clarifying that. So yes, and then obviously this was a remnant slide from the last presentation to show that, even since the kickoff meeting, some of the benchmarking and targeting goals, both from a local, kind of regional and state level, are still being considered. And obviously there's a balancing act between those different programs, the budget we have, and like you said, whatever grant opportunities there might be. Just a quick comment on that. The focus on energy, we have started that application process and are starting a kickoff meeting with that group to understand, what kind of grants might there be for this specific site location within Wisconsin, and the type of building being a police station. So we're starting that kickoff meeting to see there was a beginning, with their target tool they have. There was something in the $20,000 incentive that was mentioned, just high level, but obviously once we have a kickoff meeting with our specific application, we'll get some beginning tighter information on realistic grant opportunities there. And then the energy credits from the Inflation Reduction Act, not necessarily a grant, but that whole program with the credits, that's some of what we've already been starting to apply with the reduced value or cost of some of the features that we have. So with that, Yes.
Just a quick thing, Jim, did you mention something about a grant that might be available to the Public Service Commission?
No.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's the Energy Innovation Grant Program. And there is $500,000 specifically available for geothermal. And I believe it's $1 million if you can somehow couple it into an energy efficiency. So sorry for the late email. I did send that out to the commission about an hour or so ago. I included the webinar from the Public Service Commission, and I included the request for proposal. I do believe it's due in March. And in my initial read, because I am working with the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, who's also interested in applying for this grant, the timing seems appropriate to do types of exploratory work and larger scale community/geothermal thinking with this type of grant, if applied for and fortunate enough to receive it. So it is another option out there. Again, the Energy Innovation Grant Program.
And that is, just to add on a little bit, the OEI grant is the one that we applied for with Middleton and 5 other Dane County communities a few years ago to do the comprehensive energy planning. So Fitchburg has been a recipient of the Energy Innovation Grant in the past. This would be they fund 3 different categories. One is renewable energy and storage, one is energy innovations, and the third one is energy planning. So we'd be applying for a different category. Definitely would be happy to go more into that if people would like, but that is on our radar already. But thanks for calling that out, Jim.
Thanks, Phil.
Yes.
Apologize. Yeah, apologies that I'm moving in the background. I'm trying something different. I'm on my treadmill as I am participating in this meeting. So if you don't, if you get blurry, just turn my camera off.
No worries. No, thank you. Thank you so much. So that's good to know about the Energy Innovation Grant, and especially as you said, Phil, if there's been success with Fitchburg in the past. So maybe that's a good segue then, especially since it was just talking about geothermal, and I know that's one of the biggest cost ticket items that we've talked about in previous meetings and in our budget. I'm going to switch over. So this is PowerPoint. I'm going to switch over to the PDF document, and obviously you all probably have it in front of you and have reviewed it. But as we go through that, that's where before we get into the live discussion about which option do you think is appropriate and how we can change up the bundles. As I transition to that document, that's where we might go to specifically that page or two. So as you all know from the structure of the document, obviously we kind of laid out the different kind of categories that we were going to explore. And a lot of this was based on the leadership in energy and environmental design, the LEED system and rating system. So even though at the moment we don't have in our budget a line item for the fees associated with LEED certification, like so many of our clients, we do feel like if we follow all of the LEED guidelines to really actually give you the benefit and give you the incentives and all of the criteria, that, especially on projects like all our municipal projects that are tight budgets, that's usually the better value, is to make sure that as much of that money can actually go towards the enhancements and not necessarily also all of the paperwork and certification costs for the plaque itself. Now,
Brian,
we could, yes.
Brian, no disrespect, but that's what we were told when the library was built. And actually, after it was built, we had to do a lot. We had to invest a lot. Things were not done the way they should have been done, especially with the heating and the lighting. And so it ended up costing us more money than had we had it commissioned.
So I thank you, Diana. I appreciate that. And I knew you were probably going right to commissioning. So even though you're right, with a LEED certification, there are the prerequisites and commissioning, and there's different levels of commissioning that would be required. So I should have said at the beginning that even if we don't go through LEED certification, there's certain things that our team has already budgeted that we would do commissioning to make sure that some of those things are not missed and making sure that the systems are tuned, the way that they're designed to be, and made sure they're installed and set up that way. So we would want to make sure that some of those checks and balances that commissioning would help provide are definitely part of our building process. So, but yes, we can obviously have ongoing discussions if there's other benefits to do the lead and add some of those costs. So going through this, let me get to the right tool here. So in those categories, then this is obviously just showing that, for example, in sustainable sites, all of the categories related to that, some of those have bigger or smaller cost impacts. We know the ones that we're focusing on, all the ones that are in red, are the ones that are obviously not part of the base scope, but there has been some focus, for example, obviously on the low emitting vehicles, the charging stations, and then all the different stormwater design BMPs, whether it's permeable pavers, green roofs, the rain gardens, native plantings, all those different combinations. Those we're going to talk about here in a minute, and which ones to focus on. Water efficiency, the rain gardens, bioswales, native plantings, that gets into that category. Water use reduction, a lot of the standard specs we have for all of our low flow plumbing fixtures and stuff, that's already going to help us get some of those benefits. So that's not necessarily part of the $250,000 enhancement we're looking at. Energy enhancement, of course, that is the other big category we're going to spend most time on. Material and resources, not as much. A lot of our material content we're going to be speccing on the project from outside to inside is going to have a certain amount of renewable content. So we felt that with the enhancement bundle that you all are going to help weigh in on, that we would not focus as much on that, especially tonight. And same with the indoor air quality with low VOCs and all those different low emitting materials, that we wouldn't spend that much time on that tonight. And so with that, we went through each system. The rest of the document obviously got into the base mechanical systems and then an option 1 and 2. And so that led to a summary chart here. And so if there are questions about, the value of what our team's recommendation is, I thought maybe we could pause on this chart just for a minute. And Jason, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of summarizing, obviously what this chart is trying to convey in terms of the data we had so far with the existing building row at the top, and then the 3 rows below that in terms of the base bid system and what options 1 and 2 might provide.
Yeah, so the existing building data information was what we received from Paul and his team, actual energy cost data, EUI and CO2 information there, just as a reference. And then we looked at 3 options for the new building. So the base bid being a rooftop VAV system with hot water reheat, which is a pretty standard HVAC system.
What does VAV mean?
Variable air volume.
Thank you.
System. So we can go into more detail on that if you'd like, but again, it's a pretty typical system in the industry. So that was kind of our baseline, and then from there, you can see what we anticipate the cost per year. So I should go back. The existing building numbers were adjusted to reflect what the square footage would been for the new building to give you equal numbers as far as, as a reference, if the existing building was the same square footage as the new building, that's what the cost and the EUI would be for comparison's sake. So base building, you can see what we anticipate the energy cost to be with the base bid energy system, and then the savings in EUI, and then the CO2 reduction for that system. We also looked at then 2 other alternative options, one being the geothermal heat pump system, which gains us some energy cost savings on an annual basis. It reduces, therefore reduces our energy usage intensity, and also reduces our CO2 generation. And then the other system was a VRF system, so a variable refrigerant volume or flow system, which is gaining speed, I guess, in the industry, but it's a terminal system. So there's like fan coils that would be located throughout the building, and we would flow refrigerant through the building to each of those fan coils. Again, becoming more common. It's becoming more common because there's some energy efficiency gains with the system, as you can see, compared to the standard rooftop system. So I think that's just kind of high level, overview of the three that we looked at. If there's any questions on any of those in particular, I'd be happy to walk through that.
So the design team is recommending option one. Is that what I'm inferring down below?
Yeah, and part of that is based on some of the tax credits that are available. It also, as you can see, there's some pretty significant energy savings that can be incurred by using the water source heat pump system. So we felt, from what we heard in the initial meetings, as far as goals for energy savings, as well as the desire to reduce carbon footprint long term, that this was a good solution to kind of meet a lot of your goals long term.
Jason, I misunderstood that bold section because it says you recommend the base bid, and the base bid says rooftop VAV system, but that's not what you're recommending. You're recommending option one.
Yeah, that's miswrote. Yep.
Yeah, my apologies. That is a typo. Yes.
And how much? What's the incremental cost to do geothermal?
I think we have that outlined.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So that I was going to jump right to that one next. So, oops, wrong page. So what's interesting is everything Jason just said. When we were recommending geothermal, because it had the best energy cost savings and then the carbon reduction, we would have thought, okay, well, that's going to be even more expensive add-on cost for this bundle than the VRF system. However, what Jason and then with the Inflation Reduction Act, what we learned is if we did consider the water source heat pump with geothermal, that is the only of the options we were looking at that would qualify for that energy credit system in the tune of 25.5% energy credit. So the cost difference then, if we zoom in a little bit to the chart here, and I think these are all correct in terms of no typos, but the base bid, and again, we can look at just the last column here, the midpoint. In the schematic design estimate, there was kind of a low and a high range, so we just averaged them in the last column. So if the average cost of our base system was around $3 million, then without the energy credit, you would have been looking at over a $2 million ad for geothermal and a $1.45 million ad for the water source VRF system option 2. However, the good news is because of the energy credit of the Inflation Reduction Act, if we do go forward and get the 25.5% energy credit, then we're looking at only an additive cost of $830,000 plus minus above the base system. So that's putting it obviously well below the option 2, which would not qualify for that energy credit.
That's the best news I've heard in a long time.
So we think and I know, and again, we're not going to dig too much into the weeds because I know one thing Jason and then our consultant for the energy credits was kind of getting into the weeds and saying, okay, that counts for, we have to look at all the downstream systems that are related to the water, the heat pump and geothermal. So the duct work and everything else, we'd have to make sure that we're we're lumping the right components together. But if we are, and this is our best estimate to date, that is good news. If if geothermal was still one of the top features that you all were considering in the energy categories.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
In terms of the geothermal, obviously, you're providing energy to the building, but there are these passive measures that you can use to prevent, losing cooling, losing heat, like additional insulation and things like that, like a passive house model. Is that something that's part of the considerations, that would significantly reduce the operating costs, while obviously increasing the, it's related to this, even though it's sort of ancillary.
Absolutely. So the way we organized it is any section of the energy memo, the sustainability memo that started with a 3-point, so you had the mechanical systems, which was 3.3, renewable energies 3.4, 3.5, I think really tries to get into what you're talking about with, we termed it kind of generically exterior envelope, but anything related to glazing walls and roofs could, like you said, before the energy even gets through into the building, could really help offset the energy load and energy costs. So that's one of the bundle things that we looked at, is if the focus wanted to almost be all about energy performance, then it seems like you would want to bundle, the geothermal potentially with all of the options 1, 2, and 3 under exterior envelope. So, what we kind of described a little bit more in the body of that memo was saying, okay, the glazing number might look a lot more at triple glazing, and just instead of just 1-inch insulated glazing unit. It may look at, for the walls, it may look at not just the code minimum R value for insulation, but we would use energy modeling to optimize, okay, how much more wall insulation should we have? And then should we also look at potential sunshades? So any of the windows that have the most solar gain exposures, whether it be the west or whatever we determine in our model, maybe some of the upgraded costs for options 2 under envelope go towards extended roof overhangs or the sunshades. And then the roofs itself is, we're looking at a white reflective roof membrane with a code minimum insulation. But again, we would look at upping to see what insulation level in the roof would optimize that. So yes, to your point, we could look at really choosing all of options 1, 2, and 3 under section 3.5 to couple that with, say, geothermal, if we really wanted to focus on the energy part of this bundle.
Okay.
Hey, Brian.
Yes.
With regards to option 1 under 3.5, I noticed in the text it said a key consideration due to the project's proximity to the existing train tracks. What train tracks are we talking about?
So typo number 2, I literally just caught right before I jumped on here as well. So my apologies. That last clause, the train track should not have been in there.
Okay.
So
I kind of thought that. I kept thinking, am I missing something here?
Yes. No. That's typo number 2. So thank you, and we'll get that updated.
Brian, if you
yes.
did sunshades, then would those be retracted in the winter? So we could use the solar, take advantage of the sun heating in the winter time? And actually it's a 2-part question. Also, can we take advantage of daylight for the and adjust the indoor lighting to go off when the daylight is coming in certain parts of the building?
So the second, okay, so the first part, let me try to answer both of those, and then Jason and Andrew, feel free to chime in as well. So the, sorry, I just had a mental here. The first part, operable portion. So my first guess is that it would really get prohibitively expensive to try to do retractable. You could, but I know the most recent municipal projects we've done for this category of enhancement has been a fixed sunshade. And usually some of the study is, depending on the type of outrigger, the orientation and shape of the blades that we do and how far it goes out, Usually there's some energy modeling that's done, and it kind of goes with the passive, site design too, when you do roof overhangs, is to say, well, depending on that overhang, when you think of the high angle of the sun in the summer, when you don't want it as much, it's going to block that. But with the lower angle of the sun in the winter would be allowed in. I mean, on a smaller scale, I think that would apply even to fixed sunshades where, they're going to benefit from the higher light or heat coming in when you don't want it higher up, even with a fixed sunshade with louvers. Now, you might be thinking, if you think of retail or something, is this more of a fabric awning or is this something more opaque? Typically, we haven't done those. We've done ones that are more integrated with storefront or curtain wall systems that are louvered. Now, again, there are operable ones that are tuned to the time of year and the time of day. That could be something we look at, but those for these high level first estimates were not assumed. They were what was assumed at the moment. The assumption was more fixed sunshades. And then I'm sorry, the second part of your question.
Before you go on,
Yes.
Tri North, which is just up the road from where the police station will be built, they put in interior sunshades, what I call sunshades, that automatically go up or down depending on the sun that's coming in. Is that not an option?
Are you talking about fabric window blinds?
No, they're not. Well, they're not what I would traditionally call fabric. I don't know if they're not plastic. I don't know. They could be vinyl, but yes, they're like interior curtains, shades.
Yeah, so we have those included as a base for the whole building, but based on recommendations from facilities, those will be manual, not mechanical shades.
So if we have those, why would we need exterior sunshades?
There are two different purposes. The exterior is a horizontal projection from the building that keeps the sun from even hitting the glass during the summer, whereas the interior shade is more to block sun glare, etc., because by the time it hits that shade, the heat is already inside the building.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to reiterate. The interior is more for glare reduction and privacy and darkening, for the operations of what the task is at hand. I think, and Jason, feel free to chime in, the rule of thumb is, whatever kind of barrier, whatever layer going into your wall section, the further you move inward, the more that heat gain is allowed to penetrate. So the best way to stop it is, the outermost layers of your envelope. So that's why trying to attack that, before you even get to the glass is the first approach. And then obviously with the glazing itself, you can start to look at a ceramic frit pattern or, some sort of treatment, within that first layer of glazing, but then every layer you go in, and then if you don't do a shade until inside the building, you're still going to then trap some heat that's come in. So that is, that's the initial thought for that. So with these categories, let me just jump to, I know we did some bundles here, 1, 2, and 3 that show, depending on what your priorities are, some different combinations that could add up to the 2.5 million. Option 1 actually did not include the infrastructure allowance for charging stations, whereas bundles 2 and 3 did do that. But then what I also thought would be interesting is if I go to the live chart here, which has got all of the different categories. What I did, which was interesting, is column D is everything you see in the memo that you have. Column E is an example of the most costly option combination. So if you thought, well, what if we took everything that you've offered so far in the memo? That would total like $4.6 million if you wanted to try to take everything. And taking everything is not, some things cross out each other. So for example, if you wanted to take the highest option 3 for photovoltaics, which I think our team is not recommending, because trying to get 20% or more offset of energy with PVs is, we don't have the surface area of roofs on the building, so you would have to start adding costs to add more carports or ground mounted PVs. So that one is probably not. But if you did want to focus on PVs, for example, then you obviously can't also do green roofs on everything, because the green roofs would compete with the PVs. So
Hey, Brian,
yes.
with that option 3 under the PV, I'm kind of confused what is written up there under section 3.4.2. It says the combined square footage of all roof segments is 29,400 square feet, right?
Yes.
And then on the preceding page, it says the offset is between 28.9 and 36.
Oops.
So it seems like we fit within that range. Offset.
Yes. So the square footage, I guess, we will have to verify if the
Brian, is that the total square footage of the roof?
well, the number that should be is the total square footage of all the different roof levels. So the first floor, the second floor,
Right. So
and I guess technically the basement portion, which is the range.
yeah. So not all of that surface area is usable for a PV array, because a lot of it will be, well, not a lot of it, but there's some areas that will be taken up by roof penetrations for plumbing vents, rooftop air handling, things like that. But then also there's different levels of the roof. So there's some areas of the roof that will be in shadow more often than they're not. So it doesn't make sense to put a solar panel behind those things. So not all of that roof area is usable space for a PV design.
Okay, so the 29,400 is not, that's total roof space,
That's yes.
but some of that may not be
That's
available
gross.
for.
That's a gross
for
area.
PV.
Right.
Got it.
So just tracking, and I know we're just tracking the time here and just kind of the flow of the conversation. Just as example, if some of the comments we've heard so far are focusing, let's just say, for example, on the geothermal and some of the interest in the different exterior envelope goals, then, if we, to show how this exercise, if we wanted to move all of those to the preferred option bundle, then you can see at the end how that is potentially getting up to 1.75 million. So we could have, 800,000 left to choose from the other options, or we can switch things out. So that's just, one example. If we wanted, I know we have about 10 minutes left. If you wanted to test any of these different custom combinations besides the 1, 2, and 3 that were in the memo, or, you could obviously go into any other questions you want as well.
What's the committee think about, this is Paul speaking, what's the committee think about the EV stations? I mean, is that kind of a given that we want to have EV on this facility?
I think it is.
So I think if the committee agrees, I'd say you put that in under as a given, I think.
I did just want to say too that I would vote that we extend this conversation. I think this is essential. We can also push agenda items back to February if we need to, but I think we should let this conversation roll if that's okay. I'm happy to make that motion if we need to.
Yeah, I agree with that, Gabriella.
Yeah, so I don't think we should rush the conversation, is all I'm saying.
I agree.
Okay.
Brian, I had a question, and I'm sorry I didn't get to this earlier. I really want to leave questions for the committee members, but I realized coming into this meeting there's something that I didn't ask about. With the solar PV and offsetting certain percentages of the facility's energy, if we do go with the geothermal option, that's going to essentially that replaces natural gas usage with electricity usage. One of the benefits is that over time it's easier to power the building with renewables if it's electrified. So is an added electrical usage factored into that percent offset of PV, or what essentially what when you say 15%, 20%, 25% of the building's usage is covered by these solar options, is that before or after something like geothermal is factored in?
Does
that question
is
make sense?
I believe so. And I know, Jason, when you guys were helping to review some of the text and updates for the memo, I don't know if you have an answer to that. If some of that, I know we were just talking about that for charging stations, for example. If you accept one other sustainable feature, what is the added load or different load for that, and how does that affect something else? So, yeah, based on Phil's question right now, do you know if our category ranges for offsets accommodated or assume that?
So I think what we're saying is the PV panel with what we have available in the square footage is only going to offset 20 to 25% of our electrical load. Even if we go with water source heat pump, that's going to reduce the overall electrical load, but we're still going to have that base load there. We're not going to be within. I don't know. I don't think we've gotten to that level to know what those numbers exactly are yet. At this level.
You're probably not there. Let's be clear. With geothermal, you decrease electrical use in the summer because it's a more efficient system. Right. In the winter, you're increasing electrical use because you're offsetting, fossil-based fuels. So it's a very different scenario. And
right
when there's time, I had a couple more questions about geothermal. First question. The first is the base is 95 kBTU per square foot per year. You're using the existing public building as what that energy use, is that correct?
Yeah, and we interpolated it based on square footage.
So one of my questions is what are we doing relative to a like building in a like climate? So if right now, what is a police station in the upper Midwest? What is the average KBTU per square foot per year? And one of my questions is we're adding a whole bunch of little things and making a big alternative. And I'm just wondering is there thought to instead target like a 50 kBTU per square foot per year and see how we get there with the budget? Just a different way of thinking. And I'm not proposing that. I just wanted to bring that out to discussion. I think in some of the meetings I've been to the police want a building that they can be proud of and they want to work in. And I think the community also deserves a building that they can be proud of. So where can we go? When we're done with this, can we say that we're in the top 10% of police buildings' energy use intensity in the upper Midwest? Are we going to be able to understand where we are in that perspective regarding like buildings, like climates? Sorry for the long question.
Yeah. So I don't know where where the 55 to 64 falls relative to other police stations, but all right, I shouldn't say that. ASHRAE does publish data we just actually looked at. And so 85 to 90 is like the average KPI or EUI for police station in the United States. So that's kind of like the baseline, which is where your BAV system of hot water reheat kind of gets you. And which makes sense because that's ASHRAE's kind of standard, baseline system for like their ASHRAE 90.1 energy standard. So the water source heat pump gets you, in this case, to 55, we provide a range right now because we're in schematic design, but we're anticipating it to be between 55 and 64, depending on some of these other decisions we make as relative to the envelope that we're talking about.
Great. Second question is how'd you come up with the price estimate for the geothermal? One of the things with geothermal, for better, or for worse, is sometimes the drilling conditions are really tough, and maybe we're sitting on top of a tough karst deposit where the drillers are going to lose circulation, and geothermal is not as favorable as it sounds when it looks on print. So, what can we do if we go down the path of geothermal to possibly do a test drill thermal response test prior to all of this to make sure that we have good information for the bid and the contractor, and we understand what we're getting into, and we're not putting in geothermal where it might not belong because of the geological situation.
Brian, I can answer that. Or Phil, if you want to jump in.
I was just going to say really quickly, we have geothermal at the library, and so we can certainly look at our records there, look at what the cost was, and see if there were any notes on that. But I would assume the fact that it succeeded at the library is encouraging for the FPS.
So we did use the data from the wells at the library to make some assumptions as far as geologically what we're going to see across the street. So a lot of this information is based on that.
But we're still going to do a test well, though, right?
Yes. Yeah. So based on the outcome of today's meeting as well as the council meeting, if it's determined that the city wants to put geothermal into this building, Paul and I have been working on putting together an RFP for test wells so that we can get a true determination of what's on site there.
Excellent. I appreciate that.
If
I think one other thing to call out as just kind of a reminder, I think we talked about this in October, but just in case we didn't, something that we've discussed in some of the sustainability oriented meetings is trying to make sure that given that we do have limited budget for sustainability related enhancements here, looking at the things that not only are the most impactful per dollar, but the ones that cannot be done after the fact. So if it really comes down to it and we just can't make the dollar stretch as far as we want, solar can be added later if we make the roof solar ready. If we make the parking facilities EV ready, but we feel like the chargers aren't affordable right now, maybe down the line EV chargers are doable as long as we set up as long as we set up the power delivery in such a way that they can be added on after the fact. Geothermal is not something that you're going to add on later, and so that's one good reason for us to be focusing on that is not only the impact that it has on the building's energy metrics, but the fact that it's now or never. So those are things that are part of our consideration as well. It's also a consideration with LEED. The first meeting that we had to talk about this, I told the team I would love for this to be a LEED certified building. The library was LEED certified. I don't see a reason that we couldn't get this one to be LEED certified. My estimate, and I'm, this is really just an estimate here based on the numbers I was seeing in the application process for LEED, but it looks like it would be about $10,000, give or take a little bit, to actually go through the application process and certification. So if that $10,000 is the difference between another upgrade or not, maybe it's more important that we make the building as high performing as possible rather than get that certification. So these are some of the considerations that are going into play with each of these options.
The other thing I should point out too is that, in addition to the solar on the roof, there are options where we can buy the solar from MG&E and let them deal with all the maintenance and inverters that go bad, and the ongoing costs of those. Just initially we could, and at some point down the road, we could always add solar to the building as more proven, or technology gets even better with solar than it currently is.
I think if we get back to that spreadsheet that that you were putting together, I think based on the conversations that we've had tonight and what we said in September, which Phil just just repeated, I think we definitely want the geothermal and the glazing, the exterior enhancements. I think we want all three of those enhancements and the geothermal, and the rest of it, I think the rest of it is up for our discussion remaining, correct? So
that's correct. Yes.
How many dollars where does that put us?
Sure. So right at the end of that discussion.
I'm sorry. And the charging station.
Yes. If you all agreed with kind of the charging at a minimum, and I will say discussions we've had as a team with the user groups, at the moment, we've settled at, a lot of infrastructure for both the garage, the back lot, and the front lot. But in terms of physical charging station units that might be installed on day one, the prices you see on the screen is 6 total. So it's all the conduit, the handholds, the infrastructure for 6. That would be 2 in the public lot, 2 in the garage, and 2 in the back lot. So if you want a lot more, I know one of the things we read from a note was in some of the other pro mega developments is how maybe you started with just a couple, but more and more staff in different buildings are going EV. And so that might increase it. But if you assume at a minimum the infrastructure and at least 6, then those coupled with the envelope, we're just under 2 million. So you have about 600,000 left.
Right. I think you just need to multiply that cell by 6, because I think that's just cost per 1 unit. You're 1575.
It's awfully cheap otherwise.
Yeah, sorry, my formula, when I copied it over, I'm just going to do this because it was, I had a low and a high range. So yeah, I think it was 10,000 for the 6. So
I've got one question on on the stormwater features for the building. Do the external stormwater features like the detention basin and pond, would that address the water quality issues versus having kind of duplicate efforts on having all these other features on the building? I mean, we're going to have detention basins out there, right?
Yes, we will be required by DNR as well as Fitchburg Center to treat the stormwater on site. So base bid would be using stormwater ponds.
Okay.
It's the cheapest and easiest method to do it.
On the building. What's that?
Say that again?
Minus the green roof and permeable pavers and things like that.
If you elect to use those.
Yeah.
Right
I guess
now,
I'll just add with the stormwater features. Okay, here's a great site plan here. There's probably no way there's not going to be some sort of a larger facility for a site like this. But when you start talking about green roofs and bioswales and permeable pavement, if you were to go down that route, you could probably reduce the size of those larger basins. What does that mean? Maybe more area for staff to eat lunch, whatever. So there is, I guess, you can't really do anything with just an open body of water that's collecting stormwater runoff as far as, like a nice amenity. So there's a benefit in having those things, just that it reduces the land required to meet those regulatory requirements through traditional methods.
I'd say, where is that geothermal going to go?
The geothermal well is being studied right now, and I think
Jason, where would the geothermal field go?
The field,
in the back parking lot.
In the back, back parking lot.
Yeah, we have a layout for that already. It fits in that parking lot based on the tonnages we're expecting.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
No, go ahead.
Ben, what are your preferences for stormwater?
I guess it's kind of the opinion of what the people that are going to be most using this property for. If there's if no one's going to be doing anything with that land that these ponds are schematically shown as, then maybe the water has to meet the treatment standards set by the city, county, and DNR one way or another. So I guess it really just depends on the preferred land use. I'd like to see some permeable.
I want to interrupt a second, but I think it also gets down to maintenance. I think your maintenance would be a lot easier with these larger basins and bioswales and permeable pavers. I mean, those, especially permeable pavers, those give you a maintenance issue after a while.
Right. So
blocked up, and bioswales are hard to get established, maintained. Whereas I think these larger basins are better from a maintenance standpoint. I think you're going to end up with better stormwater treatment if you have a couple larger basins and a bunch of smaller ones. That's at least my opinion.
Yeah, I mean the maintenance is at least more centralized, certainly permeable pavement. Right, you've got to have special equipment to clean it, which the city does have. A street sweeper capable of cleaning this, but yeah, you're right, Paul. I would say in general, the maintenance costs would be greater for some of those items, and like green roofs, probably. Don't know a ton about maintenance for green roofs, but I suspect if you're looking at it from that perspective, some centralized basins would probably be cheaper.
And also easier to maintain in the future, because some of the biospheres aren't installed right, or you have problems getting them established. It's just harder to get those set up. Whereas I think the larger basins are easier to get established as well too.
If we didn't have a green roof, would that allow more solar panels up there?
Yes, that's definitely a trade-off, right? If you have all that roof surface area, it's competing for either amenity roof deck space, green roof space, or PVs or nothing. And just to add to somebody may have started to say this before, but the value, you wonder, what is the value of a lot of these different water conservation measures? So somebody on our team had said previously that, green roofs, some of these features may not contribute at all to the same equal level of water conservation. However, they may have other aesthetic value. So for example, a green roof that's on the lowest roof by the public parking lot, or a green roof that is by the staff patio on the second floor. Those may have multiple functions that they add some nice aesthetic value, and even a little bit of educational purposes, even if it didn't have the strongest water conservation purpose for this particular project.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just clarify, where we're showing the green roof now is not a good candidate for a PV array. That is, like Brian said, that's at the lowest level. So it's almost in line with that parking lot. There's a slight grade change, but it'll be in shadow much of the day.
Yeah, in this rendering, if you guys can imagine, it's pretty much all the way behind the flags. So, even though this is kind of a morning, mid to late morning rendered view, so it would have some morning sunlight, but it's going to be, once the sun goes around to the southwest, that's going to be all in shadow where that green roof is on that first floor level.
So one of my questions is, so shielding and landscaping to make the view from Fish Hatchery Road, that's being discussed, but that's part of a separate budget. Is that correct? It's not a sustainability budget to have all that landscaping.
That's correct.
Okay. And would you be able to do something like landscaping that has native plants that has some sustainability benefits, but it's a design?
So Fitchburg Center's requirements do mention native planting, and that's a big part of what they're pushing. We had our preliminary meeting with them. We'll follow up with them at the end of design development here. But a lot of what they were saying had to do with the landscape and making sure that we're talking about native plantings, as well as some of these water conservation efforts beyond just large ponds. So I think that'll be a back and forth between what the city wants, what Fitchburg Center is going to require. Granted, they're not footing the bill, you are, so I don't know at the end of the day who gets the final say.
Okay, we're over 10 minutes, so we need to can we move this discussion to the next month? Is there a motion for that, Gabriella?
No, I would prefer to move other items on the agenda to the next discussion, because I think we need to have this conversation now, because the council's potentially voting at the beginning of February. And we're having a discussion on Wednesday. So I think we should continue this discussion and potentially move other items to the next meeting, would be my suggestion.
I agree. It sounds like the mayor is looking for a recommendation after tonight.
And you're only $600,000 away from spending 2.5. So there's really not much left to decide on.
Right.
One of the important things I think we have to think about too is operating costs. Like, I understand that there's some aesthetic choices that can be made, and I appreciate that, the annual operating cost for this building is extraordinarily expensive. So like, yes, solar panels can be added later, but solar panels that we add now save on annual operating costs immediately, versus things like paying for any of the other items. So I do think at least some solar is essential. And my preference, I guess, would be higher than the base of whatever that option 2 was. That you said was feasible would be my preference, but obviously I know that changes.
Bundle 2?
No, I think you were saying the option 2, which is maybe 10 to 12% offset of energy. Is that right, Gabriella?
Yeah.
So, but then so this is a classic example, right, of just trying to figure out the whole group's priorities. Because if you wanted to take that as well, then obviously we're over the 2.5 million. So you'd have to balance, okay, do we focus on that one and then, eliminate or reduce one of the others? Or one of our clients said they wanted to have a little bit of everything so that they could showcase to the public, initiatives that other buildings in the community could do. So another project said, well, let's have a little bit of PV or a little bit of green roof, more of an educational component. And not that that's the right way to decide, but that would be a way to get a little bit of PV and still meet the $2.5 million bucket.
Before we have,
basically, you could put in, if we got $600,000 left to spend, you could just put in $600,000 of PV panels in.
well, that was one thing I was thinking, but I have a question on the electric vehicle allowance. Who's parking in the garage?
That's your squad vehicles.
And city staff administrative vehicles.
And who's parking then in not the public parking lot, but the other parking lot?
Police staff.
Personal vehicles of the police staff.
Well, I'm not sure that 2 charging stations in the garage is enough.
They currently have no electric vehicles.
This is another discussion I think we had extensively at the council. The council, I think, is pretty clear that we're interested in having build out the electrical infrastructure so that we can add electric vehicle charging stations when police squad cars become electric, which obviously is not feasible at this moment in time, but will eventually be feasible. And I understand that that's not part of this discussion right now, but I as the council member, I would like an estimate for how much it would cost to do that. And I would be happy to sponsor an budget amendment to bring that, to add that cost on top of the sustainability baseline, if that makes sense. So, but I would like to know how much that costs, so that we can have it as part of the council discussion.
Sure. I don't know that we can have that for Wednesday, but
that's fine.
Do my best. I'll do my best to come up with something.
As long as we have it for the actual vote in February, that's, I think, the more important part. And
Sure.
And whenever we get it in before then, if you could let the council know, that would be great.
Well,
everything in the squad garage, but what about staff parking and public parking?
Yeah.
So
Should we be planning to fully build those out as well? Not fully, but 30% of staff vehicles should be able to be charged or something like that.
So from my perspective, what I want, we spend a lot of money on diesel and gasoline for departments. And so that ongoing operating cost is incredibly expensive. So from a city perspective, I think we need to be investing in the things that reduce costs for the city costs. So
yeah.
I guess if we have to pick and choose, it would be good to know it. Go ahead.
Sorry, Gabrielle.
No, go ahead, please.
For perspective, we're increasing costs with geothermal or solar panels, but for perspective, we're saving money on an operating basis.
Yes.
So why can't we take those 20 years of energy savings, bring them back to present worth, and see what that today's cost of offset we're getting by spending an extra $300,000 over the budget, so that we just have perspective that sustainability features, energy features are just not capital costs. They do have a return. And so can we take 20 years of cost savings and present worth? This is what it would be.
Thank you, Jim. I totally agree.
And I also agree that we need to increase the the ability for EV charging stations outside. in the public, but even especially in the staff section.
So, Gabriella, that kind of goes counter to what you were saying about city diesel costs, et cetera.
No.
Having staff vehicles be able to be charged on site will be an increased cost for the city unless you're putting in metered charging stations.
No, I meant the staff city vehicles. Didn't you say there'd be staff parking?
So there's
Staff,
There's
as
city
in their
vehicles?
personal vehicles to get to and from work.
Oh, okay.
I think that's a nice to have and not a need to have personally. I mean,
So a handful of them, right now we're showing 2 in that lot and 2 in the public lot. Is that enough? Should we increase that?
well, see, I actually don't think you need 2 inside at this point because we don't have any electric vehicles in the police department, but we do need the ability to add that infrastructure on a rolling basis. So if you know what I mean, like we don't actually need charging stations inside right now because we don't have electric vehicles.
I'm less concerned with that $10,000 line item. I'm more concerned with understanding how many charging stations you're looking for once the thing is fully built out so that we can calculate the electrical load.
Yeah.
So
I mean, a baseline, I guess a base would be good for like all the staff for the squad cars and the staff, the city vehicles, the city paid for vehicles. I would like that to be the baseline. How much does it cost to add the infrastructure to make that happen in the future? And then as like an added on, you know, whatever you said, 20 or 30% of staff parking, staff like personal vehicle parking.
Yeah.
What would that additional cost be? And then as an additional cost, how much would it be to have a couple of the public spots be? And presumably we're going to expand electric vehicle infrastructure throughout the city anyway. So like, I don't think we need to have all of the spots electric at this point because we need to have city spaces for public to charge their vehicle. It doesn't have to be at the police station. So
sure.
Then can we just bump up solar until we hit or bump down? If we take the 10,000 out for the charging stations, can we just adjust solar to get to the 2.5 plus what Jim pointed out, the operational savings going forward, present value of that. Can we do that?
Well, if you do that, then what Jim's saying, you would need, this is Paul speaking, you would need to have the council need to, I understand what you're saying about taking those savings to pay for it today, but that would increase the amount the city needs to borrow to do the project. I'm not saying there aren't savings, but that would, if you're saying you want it, if that, you know, whatever that number comes out, whatever that calculation comes out to be, it's going to be additional money to borrow. And the question will be whether the council wants to borrow the additional money, you know, it's paid back over, say, 20 years.
Yeah, so that's just information on what that payback of that extra investment is. Yeah,
I mean, like, and I'd be interested to hear what the committee has to say, because if the committee is interested in paying for solar, like we can, in terms of like logistics, we can get more, we can take out more debt. The city has a very low debt burden. We could take out an extra $1 million to put more sustainability features in, but our ability to have general operating funds is very difficult because of state levy limits. So it's much easier to add in sustainable infrastructure that saves us money down the line than it is to make that up in our budget down. You know, so do you know what I mean? Like the debt is actually less of a concern.
I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So if you're paying MG&E for the solar energy, you're hamstrung because of levy limits. Whereas if you're putting the solar on your own building, you're able to borrow for that as a capital improvement, and thus you get more bang for your buck.
Yeah.
So I guess what I may offer is right now we're at $2.5 million. We could do the calculation for what that payback would be, and then if this, and the city could just, city wants to borrow more money, we just put more solar on the roof then, up to whatever the limit is.
Well, with regard to the solar, are we just being restricted to the roof? Is there any available land within the project area that we could use for solar panels?
It's really sloping the wrong way. It's sloping facing north.
I beg your pardon?
Facing north is the problem. It's sloping the wrong way.
The building is facing north?
No, the land slopes to the north. I mean, just there's not really that good. Just the way
that land is downhill from the building, so it tends to be more in shadow.
Yeah, it's gonna be in shadow from the building. I'm not sure if you get much area in there, quite truthfully.
Is it the same for the parking lot? The solar canopy over the parking lot wouldn't be feasible because of shading from the building?
That would be there, yeah, that canopy.
Yeah, I think if you're truly looking at something not building mounted, you're probably better off looking to the northwest of City Hall.
Yeah,
Is there a reason why we can't put solar panels over the detention basins?
You know, I don't know. I don't know if there's a. I would have to talk to our civil engineer on that one.
Are you aware of any restrictions on that, Ben? I'm not, but I think it gives you a maintenance problem though.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it in some trade magazines. I know it's been done. It may be just so expensive that maybe there's other land in Fitchburg that if you're going to put up solar panels, you could look elsewhere. I think they'd be pretty expensive, and again, maintenance issues.
So getting back to what I propose, I mean, what if we're at 2.5 million right now? We could do this calculation, and if the council wants to borrow more money, we just add more solar. Then does that make sense?
can you scroll down to the bottom line, please?
Yes, and so the way we're heading to, I'm making some assumptions that if I added the 600,000, which is that flux number for solar, we're definitely right around the 2.5 million. So that's assuming that it sounds like this group is definitely saying that things like, green roofs, permeable pavers, those are definitely some of the lowest priorities of this group. And if that's true, then you're right. We're kind of now honing in on the main categories, which is all about energy performance, the charging stations, and then PVs.
And you can take out the 10,000 for the charging stations, or at least for the ones that are inside for now, right? Because we don't have any electric vehicle in the police station now.
Are there any planned in the next few years?
Well, as long as the infrastructure's in there, we can always add them, correct?
Yeah, I guess it depends on, when you say infrastructure, what exactly are we doing? Are we terminating on the wall with electrical supply so that you can easily kind of plug and play? Or are we sizing the electrical appropriately and then running conduit from an electric room, and you're putting that charging back-end infrastructure going from your main building electric source to the charging station? Is that happening as part of the charging station install?
I think you're just putting the infrastructure in right, or the conduit in right now, Andrew, because it depends on the level of charging they end up with. You know what I'm saying? That's going to vary what size of wire you're running in there. So I think it's too much of an unknown. I think they have to just provide the conduit.
Yeah, I mean, we'll verify all these numbers, but if it's roughly, $1,700 a unit, if it's a level 2 charging station, then if we had 6 and we're just talking about 4 in this conversation, then yeah, that's 2/3 of that equipment cost. So
Can we scroll down column F just to see what we're looking at here again?
yes. So yeah, the column F, I mean, obviously, if we're kind of where we are now, then you can see how, again, the bioswale rain gardens, those would not be any enhancements. Permeable pavers are not being considered in our working column F. And then green roofs would not be considered at all either. Although I was about to mark up, just for, everyone, just again, maybe it's not your priority, but a green roof on the lowest basement roof, which is right along the public parking lot. I mean, there may be aesthetic value in that for when you're coming out on the rooftop patio, or when you're, walking back and forth instead of looking out the window and seeing, just the white roof membrane. So that's one area that would probably be the most visible on grade. If there was any interest to focus on, any roof and it could even be a tray system. I know we have to dig into the numbers more, but a 3 foot by 3 foot modular tray system, which is only that 4-inch system, if not the deeper system, could maybe shave off that number a little bit.
I would love to hear what the council, or so what the committee would like to see above and beyond, because there's always the possibility of increasing the budget. Like, that's on the table. So if the council likes green roof, if you like permeable pavers, like, let's talk about which one of those options the committee would like, so that the council has that information going.
Can I ask a question before you guys make your recommendations or commit to certain things? Paul, this might be a question you're able to answer, or someone else on the call. The Fitchburg Center Committee has purview over this site, but how much weight is behind their decisions, I guess? So if they're saying, no, you absolutely have to have a certain square footage of bios swales or green roof or permeable pavers, the sheer amount of pavement on this site was a big concern of the Fitchburg Center Committee when we first met with them. So do we need to allocate money to some of these categories in order to meet their requirements?
I think we need to come up with what we think what we can do, and then to work with them to come up with an answer to that. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. There is no. They ultimately have to approve the building before we can start construction. So they recognize that we have a tighter budget than they do on their buildings. So
For argument's sake, you could always put the 254,000, the option one of the photovoltaic, and then see what else we could get. And we can always do a budget amendment to add 500,000 to pay for more solar as a separate consideration for council. I know I have a very strong perspective on that, but also council can consider raising the budget to save on operating costs down the line.
What were you suggesting, Gabriella?
So like, let's look at doing, instead of having the 600,000 for the photovoltaic, let's do the $254,000 option and see what else we can get from sustainability features. And council can always consider raising the budget to add more solar.
Why would we come in on, are we then at only 2.1?
But then I think Gabriella is saying, then what other features could you add on? Because maybe you could add on a little bit of green roof, or maybe you could add, if you wanted parking, the parking stalls as well. Right, because then you could go back and say, okay, 2.5 million, we could get, this is kind of the little bit of everything smorgasbord. You can get a little bit of permeable paver, you can get some green roofs, and you can get kind of 2.5 to 5% of PVs. And that would,
I can say, let's spend another 500,000 to get all the solar. Like, let's increase the budget. If you know what I mean. Yeah.
You're making your sales pitch there.
And we can come up with a payback for that, Gabriel.
Yes, exactly. The payback, I think, is a really important part of the discussion.
Right.
But these other features are important. I don't want to minimize the importance of those things either. I just am trying to talk about it from my perspective as I think about budgets going down the line.
What's involved?
If the council doesn't approve, you could always add, again, we can always add solar later on too.
Yeah.
What's involved with the green roof as far as installing it, making it, building it, and maintaining it?
Do you want to take that, Brian, or you want me to?
You can start if you want. I can add on to it.
So for one, it would be some increased structure. So there's incremental cost there. And then depending on what system we go with, Brian mentioned two systems there. One's a more permanent planting bed system that's much deeper, has larger weight, but also can treat more stormwater. Or the tray system, which is easier maintenance, less weight, thus less structure. But there is going to be maintenance regardless of whatever green roof system you go with, just like there's going to be maintenance for anything else, any other plantings that you're putting on the site.
Well, I've heard horror stories about green roofs. And as Paul pointed out, as Paul mentioned, he thinks that the retention pond is probably the least maintenance heavy option. I guess that it seems to me a little bit more aesthetic than sustainable. And I'm not sure. I like permeable pavers, but I'm also concerned about the maintenance on that. So that's just my 2 cents. I think that maybe we should have a vote, or do you want to discuss this some more?
have there been permeable pavers used in large areas versus like a driveway or something like that?
Tri North has permeable pavements on half of their parking lot. They
Yeah,
have
they've
some,
done, there's been whole parking lots done with permeable pavements, and there's a lot of different options for different loading environments. You can do whatever you wanted with it.
And what's reflected in these budget numbers is for the parking stalls, so the drive aisles would still be traditional asphalt. It's just that each of those stalls that you're parking in would be permeable pavers.
This wouldn't be under the covered parking though, would it?
No,
Okay.
One more question in terms of cost, like with the 3.5 features, the passive building design features, doesn't that reduce the cost of the geothermal because the total energy use of the building goes down, or the energy needs of the building goes down? Like, does the geothermal projections take into account all of those features?
don't believe they do currently. Jason, can you speak to that? I don't know that there's going to be a huge reduction in the geothermal load just by doing those envelope enhancements.
Yeah, we will have to see what the enhancements, they do not incorporate those currently. So it would come down slightly, but probably not.
Not very significantly.
Yeah,
I guess I'd like to get back to my question, this is part 2 of my first question. Can you include, is this part of sustainability, or is this just something that is done as the normal electrical design of the building? But can you include lighting so that, you know, when the sun is shining in and they don't need interior lights, the lights go off automatically?
Yes, that was part 2 of your earlier question,
That's
right?
right.
Yes.
That's right.
So-
The daylight sensors.
The code minimum does require some of that right now. And depending on the use of that space, we can talk about that with the end user being the police department as far as which spaces we have to do it, which spaces we'd like to do it, but you know, obviously they'll be the ones to make that final determination. But yes, that's definitely a consideration going forward.
I think what Diane's getting at, Andrew, it's part of the budget already, right? That's outside of these costs, right?
Yeah, that's in the more basic hard construction cost, not necessarily the sustainability bucket.
So that's already
Right.
been taken care of, Diane.
Then my other this gets back to Gabriella's original question. What about the sunshades? Because there's a lot of light, there's a lot of glass facing south. So now I'm talking about exterior sunshades.
Brian, are those included in any of those 3.5 numbers? I don't think they are.
Well, we described, yes, under wall option 2.
Okay.
Some sort of wall-mounted sunshades would be part of that enhancement budget.
Okay.
So to your point, we would then, as we get further into the next phase, we would look at those critical elevations and where we can have the biggest impact on adding those features.
Okay.
So it sounds like we're kind of the question marks I've been putting, it's kind of like, yeah, does this committee now kind of want to take a vote or end at least for tonight with the kind of the approach of having a bunch of different categories, or do you want to kind of take out green roof and permeable pavers because of maintenance concerns and focus more upfront costs on PVs?
Where are we at now in terms of the total under column F?
Well, this current mock-up of column F is pretty much on target with our 2.5, and that's doing less PVs, but allowing for the permeable pavers for the parking stalls and a little, some green roof. And for now, I just plugged in that lowest level.
And what's the total for the numbers that are in yellow?
The numbers in yellow, 280 and 70 is the 350,000. So if you wanted to do that, and let's say that you did, option, I'll just plug this one in. If you wanted to get more PVs and you guys were talking about upping the budget, then you could take the more PVs, and then you're at, 3 million. And that goes to a $500,000 increase in that amount. And I know right from the beginning, I think James had mentioned the energy innovation grant. So if there's 500,000 there, I mean, I guess that's still to be determined, but does that help offset costs as we learn more about those other grants?
And one last thing to clarify here, before we start increasing that preferred budget, we did talk about getting a number for the charging stations and getting the infrastructure for charging the entire squad garage. So that 150 will go up regardless of whether you're installing the charging stations now or not. So that's true.
Because of the number of stations?
Say that again?
Because of the number of stations?
Yeah, right now we're putting infrastructure in for 6 of them. There are, I believe, 36 in the garage, right, Brian?
Yeah, 36 bases. And part of it was for routing. So like if the lots needed them, and depending on where the charging stations are, the more surface area you have to get your power to in both the public lot and the staff lot, it's those different, routes and quantities that are going to start adding up as well.
Yeah, so it's not going to be a purely 6-fold increase in that 150, just because there's 6 times the number of parking spaces that we're talking about. So that's a number we have to figure out. And it's going to be somewhere, my guess is, between what we've got right now, the 150, and I'll say 400 to 500.
Something that might not happen for 20 years.
I ultimately think that we can. I think that adding the infrastructure to make electric vehicles happen in the future is something that the council should discuss as like a piece, and then adding more solar so that we can reduce the operating costs and it'll pay off down the line is like another discussion that you could potentially increase the budget and justify it with future operating savings down the line. So I guess what I'm saying is that I'm interested in this committee having like a say in like kind of the full picture of sustainability, and I'm just telling you, we can talk about those other pieces as with the council, and potentially expanding the sustainability budget specifically.
So I think the only thing it sounds like the commission is not. I think we don't really have a definite answer on is the permeable pavers and the green growth. I guess my suggestion is so we can just get this thing resolved. Could we have the committee just vote on each of those items somehow? That's my suggestion to the chair.
I guess I would like to hear a little bit more about what are the negative aspects of a green roof, or, in terms of the maintenance concerns, as well as the permeable pavers as well.
I'll start with some of the negatives, and then Andrew, feel free to chime in. I mean, the negative sometimes, sometimes you do it partly for water conservation and partly for the aesthetics. And sometimes we hear post-occupancy complaints that, the plants died, and it looks worse. I mean, it looks just as bad as a white roof because it's all dead, So I think, the maintenance is key in terms of the maintenance and upkeep, whether it's sedums or whether, depending on the depth of the soil, it affects the type of plant material you can have and what you expect it to look like. So I think that's a downside. I think the downside, of course, cost is one, because even with the 3-inch or 4-inch tray system, especially when it's wet and the water is soaking in there and soil weight, it is going to add to the steel sizing and cost of whatever roof framing is incorporated in that. So I think a negative is the cost. And then just if you did want to replace it, I mean, I think a tray system is easier. I mean, if you did want to change something out, it's in these separated trays. So you can literally swap out one tray at a time, or swap out, if you have a dead tray or an area, it's a lot easier to modify that. than a different type of system. So those are a couple of the negatives that come to mind for me.
And I'd add to that the maintenance. Yeah, it's added maintenance. And then there's the potential that if and when there is a leak in the roof membrane, it's more difficult to find that leak because you're then having to remove this tray system in order to determine exactly where that's coming from. Not to say that that should be a determining factor, that it's just one of the components of.
I mean, if we're looking at aesthetics, it almost seems like it'd be better to just put plants in pots.
That's what I was thinking.
Get some nice pots.
It's not, it
Place
doesn't
them
seem,
strategically.
it doesn't seem to me to be serving a real significant stormwater issue. And I think the maintenance part and the potential for problems is just not worth it.
Yeah, that's my feeling too.
Well, you can also do bioswales for half of the cost of that one green roof, right?
Well, what's the bioswale going to look like? It's just going to be grass, or are you going to have a rain garden? Which would
it wouldn't be turf grass. It would look more like what you're thinking, a rain garden, if that's the example you want to use.
Right.
It'd be more native plantings and things like that.
Well, as you pointed out earlier, Gabriella, it would be nice to have the maximum number of solar panels possible up front so we can start saving money right off the bat.
Right.
We can always add a rain garden.
Brian, one sustainability option we haven't talked about, and I don't know that we've even explored it because we've been focused on what's on this list. Have we talked about rainwater harvesting or gray water systems or anything like that?
I mean, it was in the memo, but because of the complexity of having to do more research on, what is the quantity of rainwater that would be collected in a number of different cisterns. I mean, basically for the SD estimate, there was not enough information to get accurate pricing right now. And so what we thought coming into this meeting was if rainwater harvesting wanted to be a feature that really wanted to be focused on, most important, for example, then that would be something that would be information for our team to go back and start to get more information on if you did a multi-cistern, rainwater harvesting element, what would that cost? But again, from previous meetings, we heard most importantly about energy focus and about the charging stations as well. So
yeah, just to, I guess, help this debate about bioswales and green roofs, etc. I can't say for certain, but it's potential that you'll get more bang for your buck out of rainwater harvesting, and that will be a future operational cost reduction. I don't know how your water utility works, whether I know it's kind of internal to the city, but sometimes there's
what would the rain harvesting purpose serve for? I mean, you have irrigation. Why can't you just pump water out of the detention basins for irrigation?
There's some restrictions with that, just with concerns of what's running off into the pond.
Well, how about the stream that goes through there?
But what
I don't
about
think
this?
it's a flowing stream.
No, it's I think
Ephemeral.
Intermittent or ephemeral, so it's really only flowing after rain events. I don't know if there's a groundwater input into that portion of the creek there.
adjusting, just constantly tweaking this based on comments I'm hearing. If if some of the negatives about green roofs and maybe not having the benefit and just being more aesthetics, if that was definitely something the group is maybe learning more about and shying away from, but maybe permeable pavers still have, a desire, then to get again to 2.5, at least for tonight, we could go back to the PV category in 3.4 for renewables and say, okay, with everything else you've accepted, and we know there's still some variables and moving parts, but at least around $500,000 of this 2.5 million could be devoted towards PVs. And, depending on everything else that the council talks about, that could go up or down depending on, if there's additional funding or grant opportunities or things like that.
Phil, with the stuff that we're talking about tonight in terms of potentially, eliminating, would it affect our LEED certification? Like the rain gardens, et cetera?
Potentially. So in terms of the water efficiency, what they're looking at for outdoor water use reduction, it's not necessarily specific measures. There is a calculation you would have to submit that says that our outdoor water use is essentially no greater than we're essentially not adding any irrigation outside of the initial startup period. So once you've gotten everything going, your trees, your grass, whatever, you gain points for saying we're not doing any additional irrigation for lawns or other landscaping maintenance. Having a rain garden or not, having permeable pavers or not, those are one possible avenue for achieving the goals. But a lot of the things in the LEED scoring system are about the outcome more than they are about the specific approach. And so if we have other ways of making sure that we're maintaining natural resources in the area, minimizing site disruption, that we're preserving water use, rainwater irrigation rather than green roofs. There are more than one way to skin the cat, as they say.
I assume our detention basins would be inducive to for wildlife, to be attractive to wildlife, particularly how they're designed, correct?
Potentially. Yeah, we wouldn't be stocking it, so you're not going to get wading birds probably very often. But especially if we would, and this is going to increase the cost, this is something you'd have to bring in Anna and her team and ask how viable it is. But if you would add riparian area sort of buffer plants, if you had things that you'd find at the edges of wetlands, at the edges of ponds, those are going to help filter the water as it enters the stream, as well as kind of preventing erosion and sedimentation buildup. And that, those would then also attract more wildlife. That's getting into the weeds, no pun intended. But yeah, we wouldn't necessarily have to do permeable pavers to make or break our chances at getting LEED.
Okay, thank you.
How much benefit are we getting from those limited permeable pavers? And how many more PV panels could we get if we didn't have those?
Obviously, we'd have to quantify that. The dollar amount, you'd get that much more. But in terms of the energy, payback, like in the sustainable features, if you took that away, what is the stormwater benefits of those parking stalls? I think the $75,000 was for all of the site parking stalls, not the drive aisles. So that's what that quantity is. I think the PVs, if we did not do any green roofs, which is kind of sounds like we're heading maybe not in that direction, then the only thing, as Jason clarified earlier, is if we're putting more and more effort and focus on PVs, and let's say we add, we're getting closer to that 763,000, then we'd want to make sure that if that is, whatever that can afford, the number of panels, that still can fit on the viable roof surface area we have. Because not only is there, I think, usually a 10-foot buffer offset from the edge of the parapet that you need to start the units, but then there's a whole shading study to see, well, based on where the shade is and the time of day, what parts of that roof are the most viable. So we're pretty confident that option 2 will, should work with the configuration of the building and the roofs. But at some point, there's going to be a trade-off between, having too much PV panels that you want to spend money on that's not going to fit the ideal, roof configuration that we have.
So it
So
sounds like some of these decisions are going to have to wait till we have a little more information, but
we could at least document the end of this discussion with, some combination that gets at the 2.5. And like we're showing now, it can either be a combination of, 500,000 for PVs roughly, and a little bit of permeables, or again, if there's still concern that permeable pavers for maintenance and snow plowing may not be the best strategy, then we could end today's discussion if you wanted us to zero that out and put that extra funding towards the PV line. Or we could explore both, but as long as they both add up to 2.5 now, I think that they're both meeting the initial goal, which was to find a bundle that arrived at that amount.
My inclination is to apply the permeable pavers to the PV. I mean, I'm just trying to think the benefit. I understand the benefits of permeable pavers, but is it really going to benefit us in the long run in terms of energy savings and in helping us keep costs down? That's my thought. 2 cents. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Ron. I think there would be a little bit, there's going to be more maintenance costs with it then, right? Same with the green roof. So if we're trying to limit some of our maintenance costs and reduce our operation costs, it seems like putting more funds into the solar is the way to go.
And so
Now,
I think
if we get energy credits, then we have some extra dollars to either, if we're not already maximizing the PV panels, we have extra dollars to think about the other things, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
When will we know about that?
well, we've already shown you energy credits here. You're talking about the one that was mentioned earlier to me. That
Yes.
you're still the most we can spend on solar panels is $2 million, right, Brian?
The solar panel, yes. The most was the 2 million was the full price. Is that what your question was, Paul?
Right. So you're at 1.5 million actually.
Yes. Yep.
So let's just say, Diane, you could hypothetically get the $500,000 for that. Now you're up to $1 million, and you get the council approves more money. My point is you're not gonna end up with more money than what we got here for all the solar panels. So I think what I'm hearing in the committee is we pretty much are going with the geothermal as much as we can for the PV panels. If we get more grants, we'll just apply it to that and get more solar panels, do the exterior envelope, and then do some adjustments with the EVs. And I think that gets us. I think it gets us the information we need tonight. Don't you believe, Brian and Andrew?
Absolutely. Would totally appreciate all the conversation. And that was a primary objective, again, to try to get at least one scenario to get us to the 2.5. And then a lot of those questions that we know still need to be answered are going to be forthcoming here, hopefully shortly.
And then we'll be able to get an answer to Alder or Gabriel about the payback period, potentially if we go with more solar. That would help, justify, any additional borrowing for the project. If we can't get the additional grant money.
fantastic.
All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Well, thank you. We'll definitely document this and send it to you, Paul and Phil.
Ron, do we know that everybody's in agreement with this?
That's what my next question was going to ask before we leave this talk item. I mean, is everybody pretty much in favor of what we've done here, or is there any concerns? Kim, you're shaking your head.
I am, yeah. I am in favor because geothermal and solar has incentivization right now So there's immediately that 25 to 40% from the federal government, plus the cost savings over the load time. And then if you sprinkle in a few of the other things, that's what I'm in favor of.
Okay. Kim?
Yeah, no, I'm in favor as well. I just wanted to get a little bit more information on the green roofs and pavers. So I
Okay.
support
Chris?
this.
Yeah, I'm aligned as well. Thanks for asking that question, Kim, but I think where we're coming is, focusing on trying to get those energy credits from the geothermal and the photovoltaics.
Okay. Diane?
Oh, I think you already know that. I agree with that.
Okay.
I'm great.
Gabriella?
Yep, definitely in agreement.
Okay. I don't think Andrew's on the call, is he? I don't see him. Liger? Okay. All right. Well, yes. Is there a way we can get a summary of what we discussed today, sent to the commission members?
Absolutely. I will clean this up, package it, and send it to Paul and to distribute to you all.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to move agenda items 4D, the Hartung Fields, 5B, the annual report, and 5C, the calendar events, to the February meeting.
I second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None opposed? Motion adopted. Okay, so we can move on then to item 6, council update. Gabriella?
Oh, I think we still have Fitchburg Star articles on the.
Oh, I thought you said
Just in
5A,
case.
B, and C.
We've
Oh, yeah,
got
just
resolution 2, 4C.
Oh,
Did
the
you-
resolution. Yes, the resolution.
Oh, yeah, we got the resolution. That's right. Okay, thanks, Ben. Is there, okay, item 4C, resolution R-229-23, authorizing Dane County services for stormwater permit review and erosion control inspection in 2024. Is there a motion to adopt this?
I move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, up for discussion. Ben, you want to describe this?
Yeah, so Dane County provides erosion control inspection services as well as stormwater and erosion control permit reviews. So they review applications. They also do the boots on the ground inspections throughout the year for both city and private projects. Those costs for private projects are billed back to the permittee. And I guess are there any questions from the group on exactly what services Dane County is providing with this?
No,
This is
I think
just
I saw the
routine,
contract
correct?
language.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other discussion? If not, take a vote. All in favor, approving the resolution, say aye.
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 All opposed? Not opposed, resolution approved. Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Okay, so we eliminated 5, we moved 5A, B, and C to next month, correct?
Not
I think I
okay.
left Fitchburg Star in case we needed to talk about next month.
Diane, well, one thing about the Fitchburg Star item 5A, I think we need to find someone to help take over Diane's role in this. And I'd like to find someone who could do that. One of the thoughts is maybe having Andrew help out in that area, but he's not on this call.
I think that's a good idea to inquire about that, see if he'd be willing to do that.
I can follow up with Andrew on that.
Give him a good role with the commission.
Okay. And Diane, I think we're all set for articles then.
Jim is up for next month, and then you're up for March, and I'm up for April.
Okay.
So we're squared away with that.
Okay,
Oh,
great.
and Jim, I'll send you, I don't think I have, but I will send you I guess I'll call it the criteria. Makes it sound a little bit weird, but I'll send you our guidelines for writing the articles. I'll do that this week.
Sounds good. And I remember volunteering to discuss geothermal exchange in that article.
You can, if you're welcome to change the topic if you'd like.
No, start with your passion.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, let's move on to item 6N, council update.
So we are postponing the council meeting tomorrow because of the potential bad weather. So we are meeting on Wednesday night instead at 7:30, and we will have an agenda item to talk about the police facility, but no vote will be taken that night. We are tentatively planning to vote on the schematic design and the budget for the police facility on February 13th. So there's
February 15th,
February 13th.
13th, okay.
Yeah, the first meeting in February, just so you could have a sense of the timeline. And then council will also be discussing over the next couple months a potential referendum for the August ballot. We've been discussing it for like close to 6 months now, so that's going to continue. And then we are also going to do an update to the ARPA TID investment plan again, sometime probably in March, April time period. So that will be forthcoming. And that's enough the update.
No, that was quick. Thank you. All right, let's move on to item 7, solid waste. Ben?
Yeah, it's a big one here, and I mentioned this earlier. The parks crews have a little extra time over the winter, so on Saturdays and Sundays, they're going to be going out to the recycling center with their available time, probably a couple hours, and just checking where people are coming from, essentially. And we'll see where that goes.
Will they be personally stopping the vehicles then and checking?
Yeah, just, going up to folks, emptying out their vehicles, where you're coming from, that kind of a deal. So yeah, just trying to get a sense of who's all coming out. And then if there's people dumping things that shouldn't be, then staff will be there to note that.
Okay.
So that's kind of the solid waste update.
Stormwater?
We have proposals for the Goose Lake Fitchburg Road stormwater improvements project coming in. It's January 19th now. I think it said January 16th. It'll be the 19th. So this is kind of furthering what was done in 2021 with AE2S. They provided some recommendations for alleviating some of the flooding issues at Fitchburg Road that involved basically work really in Goose Lake and the Dane County wetlands. So we'll be getting some proposals back to advance that design and bring it into permitting. Other big one is the Crescent Road Stormwater Improvements Project. That is progressing. We've got 30% plans for that, and that is still anticipated to be completed in 2024. This is the project that we will be using the EPA community grant funding for, or the monies earmarked by Tammy Baldwin. So that's where we're going to spend that. And then finally, staff presented to the Yahara Winds group. That's the watershed adaptive management group. So we presented a potential project that would involve some stabilization work through Yarmouth Greenway. I think the presentation was well received. We'll be working with the DNR on more of a formal request to Yahara Winds to see what if any funding they'd be willing to provide for this project. So hopefully a cool project, and I think a really important project that we can see come to fruition in the next couple of years or so.
Okay. Dan, how come the Hartoon Fields plat stormwater management is not part of this discussion here?
Well, there was an agenda item for it.
I know, but we were never notified of it before, and all this stuff was going on.
I honestly didn't hear about some of the concerns until I got an email from Stephen Schooler. I think you were copied on it.
Well, the Friends of Waubesa Wetlands notified.
Yeah, so I don't typically include updates for plat projects in this. For example, there's the Crescent Crossing plat, the Highfield Reserve plat, all going on right now. I typically have not included updates for those, but I certainly could include updates on plat projects in the future if that would be something of interest.
I think it'd be useful because we have third-party people reaching out to us asking what's going on. So
Sure. Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Thank you. All right. 7C, Phil, you're up. Sustainability.
All right. Had our first sustainability planning team in December. We've got the next one tomorrow. These are going to be continuing through June to have our team of just under 20 working through what the structure of the plan will be, what our focuses will be. Council approved a settlement from Huawei Technologies. We finally closed that chapter on our solar rooftop. Got a little bit over $11,000 from Huawei as a settlement, and we'll apply that to replacing the 4 inverters that are still out on the library and the Public Works Maintenance Building. Hopefully that'll be done in the first few months this year before we get into our peak solar generation months. Just got to work out how exactly the finances are going to work and get some bids to get the best possible option there for new solar inverters.
Phil, before you go on, lesson learned on that one. The next time we buy solar panels, we'll just get ones that are made in the U.S.
Possibly. Honestly, one of the ones that's been recommended to us by at least one vendor is made in Europe. There definitely are some options made in the US. They're not necessarily the best, but we just have to look at what the options are out there. It certainly might make a difference if we're looking to get any kind of rebates or credits. Buy American provisions may come into play there. I don't know that there's much of a lesson to be learned here because it's hard to anticipate a company going under, closing up shop in the US when you've bought a 20-year warranty from them. We got caught holding the bag there. We'll certainly try to be careful. You don't just want to go with the cheap option when there are other things at play, but I wasn't here when the decision was made. And so it's tough for me to go back and say what might we have done differently with just 2 bids to compare against each other. I think this has been shared already, but the police department is no longer hosting its med drop. There are various reasons for this, but the med drop will no longer be there. The biggest place where this impacts RCC is that for the spring and fall shred recycling events, the med drop will no longer be a part of that. So there are a couple of other events around Dane County that the Fitchburg PD is now going to direct people towards. And there are a few pharmacies and places around the Fitchburg and Madison area where you can drop off medication. So it's less convenient now, unfortunately.
Phil, that hasn't been shared previously with us, so okay. I'm wondering why they made that decision.
It had to do with the biggest thing was cost and time, and just that they were handling a much larger volume of things that weren't really medications. It was becoming a hassle, and the cost benefit I think wasn't there. I didn't get all the details when I asked them, but it just sounded like it was more of a burden than they felt like it was providing benefit, given that there are other options in the area.
Well, the other options are being primarily provided by other police stations. I mean, this was a service that the police department provided. I think that, and when it started, they were getting grant money to help fund it. I don't know if they're still getting that, but
yeah, I couldn't speak to that.
Pardon me?
I can't speak to that. I don't know. I couldn't tell you all the details on it. I know that they're no longer providing that.
So, is it an option? Sorry. Is it an option for us to do that, just collect it at our events?
I would imagine for safety reasons, we could not. I think that would be, I would imagine if I asked our attorney about it, that she would, her eyebrows would go way up. I don't think she'd be in favor of that. I think it'd be a liability on multiple fronts.
So Phil, my suggestion would be, if this is the case, then for our upcoming events, if we had a piece of paper that I can hand out that lists other locations where they can take their meds, that would be very helpful, because oftentimes, it's just people just coming in to drop off meds and they don't have anything else.
Yeah.
Because trying to tell them where to go, like, they're not gonna remember.
Yep. And we'll make sure that we put it in our advertising. That'll, of course, be a new piece of information that needs to be highlighted. But we'll think about the best way to get that out. And maybe it's just having, not necessarily. We'll figure that out when it comes time to start planning that event.
We it's obvious from the volume that it's a service that is needed. And by not having it be convenient for residents, I'm concerned that more of these will be flushed down the toilet, and that's what we don't want to happen.
Right.
So we need to do some outreach to make this as easy a transition. It's unfortunate that this happened without any input from others.
Is there
I think it's really just a capacity issue at the police department. It's in a weird spot. They can't police it. They can't see what's happening. And so people were just putting the medicine in inappropriately in a lot of ways, and it became a huge issue.
So in the new department, in the new building?
I think that's on the table, and I think we should bring that up at some point when we're closer to the end of the process. But I think it's just logistically with how the police department is set up. It just is not, they're not able to properly man it. But with the new facility, I think that potentially could come back.
Yeah, it's a good point.
All right, and then the last item is, at the end of this month, we're going to host Green Tier Legacy Communities all-member meeting. We do a few of these every year, and they try to do at least 2 of them in person. So we're hosting January's, and unfortunately, it's not the greatest time to say go tour the O'Brien solar fields, because we're hoping that there's snow covering everything. So coming up with a tour is a little bit challenging, but we are going to have everybody come over to probably the East Fire Station. I'm still working out details with Chief Pulvermacher, kind of make sure that there's enough parking space there for the number of attendees we'll have. But either the East or the West Fire Station, we're going to tour and look at some of the cool stuff going on there from energy savings perspective. And then we'll talk about, because the police facility is still underway, we'll be talking about actually the joint comprehensive energy planning process that we did a couple years ago, sponsored by that energy innovation grant. So it's just a good opportunity to get people to Fitchburg, and we share different ideas and networking, and be a fun meeting in a few weeks.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, well, it's 9:03. It's not too bad considering the long discussions that we had today on the police facility, which was good. I'm glad we were able to get a lot of things, our questions and concerns answered, and hopefully we can move forward with a lot of our ideas. So any other follow-up on activities being conducted by or monitored by the commissioners? Anything people want to bring up?
I have something that I'm really delighted to share. Mount Horeb, a fellow from Mount Horeb contacted us because they're interested in implementing an idling reduction campaign. So I know this is the second community that has contacted us and asked us to share our methodology, and I sent probably an overload of documents when I went back to look at how this started, and it was quite a lengthy process, but I thought that was very encouraging to hear another community is doing that. And along those lines, we had I think we had something for Fact TV put up about idling reduction. We've kind of put idling reduction on the back burner. If we could make sure that Fact is still doing that. And also Kim was starring at a video about the recycling drop-off site, the do's and don'ts. And again, if Ben, you could check to see if that video is still being run occasionally, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, one other thing. I haven't seen anything. Ben, did you send an email out to or a draft letter or memo out to the alders about Saltwise? Because I haven't seen anything.
I did.
how can we get that circulated? That was one of the things that, one of the ways we wanted to reach out to residents. Gabriella, do you have thoughts on that?
In terms of getting it out, I mean, I can certainly talk about it with at council and RCC report and ask them to share it out. But in terms of like a bigger picture, how we get it out, I feel like that's a bigger discussion.
No, I was just thinking that I mean, the alders, I think, have their own email distribution list to their residents, and that's what we were hoping they could. Isn't that what you sent, Ben?
It was like a little piece for if alders have a blog that they keep updated with kind of information for their area. I think that's kind of how it was written.
Okay.
I can certainly encourage them to do that. Not all the council members have emails or blogs or even social media. So, yeah, I'll let the people know that do that and make sure that I can help with them personally too and make sure that they do. But I'll make the point at council as well.
Ben, is it something that would make sense to put on like our neighborhood Facebook post, or I don't know, maybe we could just pull some talking points out of it and do that?
Share all the outreach resources that we've accrued with the group, and you can kind of take a look and see what you like. There's a lot of good options.
Okay.
Certainly no wrong way to do it. There will be a half-page ad in the January Fitchburg Star with just a graphic that kind of talks about salt use. So
Great.
there's still more of that
nice.
coming.
Is it on Fitchburg's Facebook site?
Is what on the
The
graphic?
Saltwise, the blog or whatever, that material.
no, it is not. But we could certainly add a link to that on our webpage.
Tomorrow could be a good day for it since
Right.
doing the
No,
weather.
I keep slipping on my driveway because it's just ice and I refuse to put anything on it. So,
Well, don't hurt yourself. Get some
well,
sand
I
out there
know,
or something.
but I don't know what the alternatives are besides
Get
kitty
some play
litter.
sand out there.
Grass.
Kitty litter.
All right, anything else? If not, thank you everyone for tonight's meeting. We'll adjourn the meeting at 9:08.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Night.